Greetings, fellow lords and ladies. Our look at Game of Thrones Season 4 now continues on with the episode Oathkeeper. Beginning in Meereen, Missandei teaches Grey Worm how to speak the common tongue, where he reveals that all he remembers since his castration is that he was born in the Summer Islands. Missandei also reveals that she can remember that she saw Noth burning, and she was taken as a slave for Slaver's Bay. Daenerys commands him in several unsullied to infiltrate Meereen disguised as slaves and convince the slaves to rise against their masters. They visit a slave pen, where a number of slaves are discussing whether or not to riot against the great masters. One of the young slaves is already trying to convince his fellow men in chains to fight, but the older slaves argue they have no means to oppose their masters, who have squashed every previous slave rebellion. Grey Worm arrives and tells them that only they can free themselves, then presents them with weapons. The uprising is a resounding success. The city hers. Dany orders the crucifixion of 160 of the so-called Great Masters in retaliation for the 163 slave children crucified on the road to Meereen. Sir Barristan advises her against it, saying that sometimes it's best to answer injustice with mercy. Daenerys shows her Targaryen blood by firmly declaring that she will answer injustice with justice. The cries of the crucified Great Masters reach Dany's ears atop Meereen's tallest pyramid, where the city's emblem, the Golden Harpy of Gis, has been draped in the banner of House Targaryen. Now she has conquered all three of the cities on Slaver's Bay. Meanwhile, at the Wall, Jon Snow and Grenn are teaching several recruits, including Locke and Ollie, how to fight against wildlings. Alliser Thorne admonishes Jon and reminds him that he is a steward, not a ranger, trying to provoke Jon for an excuse to have him killed. Jon leaves the yard and talks with Locke, who pretends he is from the Stormlands and generally wants to protect the realm. Generously points out to Thorne that while Jon is well liked, Thorne is not, and when Maester Aemon insists upon an election for a new Lord Commander, Jon is far more likely to succeed Mormont. Soon convinces Thorne to allow Jon to deal with the mutineers, in the hope that they will remove him from the problem. Meanwhile, Samwell Tarly is fretting about Gilly's safety in Molestown with the wildlings loose. Jon sympathizes, telling Sam he knows how hard it is. He confides that ever since Sam told him that his younger brother Bran Stark was alive and going beyond the Wall, he has wanted to go and find him. Sam explains he really tried to bring Bran back with him, but Bran was determined to go beyond the Wall. When Sam and Jon think that Bran must have found shelter at Craster's Keep, they are interrupted by Locke. Locke brings Jon to Thorne, who sanctions his mission to Craster's Keep, but tells Jon he must secure volunteers rather than have men ordered along with him. Jon gives an impassioned speech, insisting that not only must mutineers be dealt with for Castle Black's safety, but Lord Commander Mormont deserves justice. Much to Thorne and Slynt's surprise, Grenn, Edison Tollett, and a group of other men join Jon in his mission, including Locke, who asks to say his vows if that is required before he goes north of the Wall. In King's Landing, during their sword training, Bran implores Jaime to visit brother Tyrion in the dungeon, saying that Tyrion named Jaime's champion in the Eyrie because he knew Jaime would ride day and night to fight for him. Jaime finally visits Tyrion, confessing that Cersei asked him to murder him. Convincing Jaime that he didn't kill Joffrey, Tyrion notes that not even irrefutable evidence and a confession by the real perpetrator would satisfy Cersei. She is out for Tyrion's blood, and he says that the trial is even worse because at least one judge has always wanted him dead. Jaime tells Tyrion that Cersei offers a knight to whoever captures Sansa Stark. Tyrion says that Sansa had nothing to do with the murder, despite having the best motive. Later, Jaime visits Cersei, who discusses that, in her view, Jaime is taking Tyrion's side because of his long-held affection for their brother. Meanwhile, Lady Olenna tells Margaery that she is about to leave for Highgarden. She mentions a new and prospective marriage between Margaery and the new king, Tommen. She says that Cersei will turn Tommen against Margaery by the time they marry if Margaery doesn't act fast. Fortunately, Cersei is well distracted by accusing her innocent brother of the murder of her son. Margaery insists that Olenna cannot be certain of Tyrion's innocence, but Olenna states that Tyrion is certainly is innocent and confesses that she would never have let Margaery marry that beast. Margaery is shocked, but her grandmother firmly ends the conversation. That night, Margaery enters Tommen's chambers, slipping past the King's Guard and charming Tommen. She puts in his mind the idea that one day she'll be his, and they might well learn to like each other. She compliments him on his cat and kind demeanor. She promises to visit again, and Tommen falls asleep smiling. Aww. In the chambers of the King's Guard, Jaime tasks Brienne with finding Sansa. He urges her to find and keep the girl safe from those who would hand her over to Cersei and provides her with horse, supplies, and a freshly forged suit of armor. Jaime then gives her the sword his father gave him, saying that his Valyrian steel is forged from Ned Stark's sword, and this should be used to defend Ned Stark's daughters. He also says she'd take Podrick Payne with her as a squire, both as a reward for the boy's service to Tyrion and to keep him safe from those who would seek to use him against his former master. Before departing, Bran names the sword Oathkeeper and vows to find Sansa for the sake of Jaime and Lady Catelyn. Meanwhile, on the Narrow Sea, Sansa accuses Peter Baelish of having Joffrey Baratheon murdered. At first, Baelish evades the accusation, pointing out that he has been away for weeks and that Tyrion could be the perpetrator. Sansa defends Tyrion with an innate certainty that he is innocent, and also claims that Baelish is far too smart to trust a drunk like Ser Dantos to be his accomplice. Impressed with instincts, Baelish admits that Tyrion is, in fact, innocent, and reveals that Sansa's own part in Joffrey's death. Ser Dantos' necklace was the murder weapon, and someone slipped a stone which was poisonous into Joffrey's wine. Sansa is bewildered because the Lannisters have done so much for Baelish, including granting him the seat of Harrenhal. Baelish confesses that while his friendship with the Lannisters was fruitful, it is best to keep enemies confused, and his absence from the wedding means that he will never be suspected. Sansa declares that she does entirely believe him. He's too clever to poison a king just to cause confusion. Baelish is again impressed, and confirms that Joffrey was simply too volatile. Killing him as an ally was more hindrance than a benefit. More importantly, though, Joffrey's death was something that his new friends wanted very much, and a gift is always helpful to help a new friendship grow strong. Meanwhile, beyond the wall, at Craster's Keep, the mutinous deserters are still entrenched there, indulging themselves on the food stored there and raping Craster's wives. Carl Tanner drinks wine from the skull of Jorah Mormont, drunkenly bragging about himself as his skill as a hired killer back in King's Landing before ordering Ross to feed the beast. At the same time, one of Craster's wives enters with Craster's last son, insisting the infant must be given as a gift to the gods. At Carl's orders, Ross leaves the infant on a patch of open ground, then deals with the beast, Ghost, who the mutineers have caged, and whom Ross taunts by withholding food and water from the direwolf. Suddenly, a snowstorm whips up and the temperature drops, causing the water Rast was taunting Ghost with to freeze. Recognizing the approach of White Walkers, Rast flees. Nearby, Bran Stark and his companions hear the child's cries. Working into summer, Bran goes to investigate, but Summer falls in a trap just outside Craster's Keep. Mira Reed, sensing danger, urges them to move on, but Bran insists on trying to free Ghost and Summer. Before they can, however, they are taken prisoner by the mutineers. Some of the deserters amuse themselves by tormenting Hodor, while the others are taken to Carl. Carl asks who they are and answers their silence by threatening to kill Mira and Jojen. Jojen is suddenly overcome by a seizure and falls to the floor while Mira begs to be let go so she can help him. Carl does so when Bran reveals his true identity. And finally, in the lands of always winter, somewhere in the northernmost reaches of the world, a lone White Walker rides its undead horse towards a shattered mountain, cradling Craster's last son in its arm. When it reaches the mountain, the White Walker strides up a large ring of icicle columns, dismounts and places the child on an ice altar in the center. On the other side, a line of dark-garbed White Walkers watch the proceedings. After a moment, one of them strolls forth and carefully picks up the wailing child, who swiftly calms. The White Walker presses the nail of his index finger into the baby's cheek. The sound of cracking ice can be heard as the child's eyes turn a depthless, icy blue. Dun dun dun. So let's take a look at some notes surrounding this episode. The name of the episode comes from Oathkeeper, the name Bran gives to the first Valyrian steel sword made from ice. Despite appearing in the title sequence, Winterfell and Dreadfort do not appear in the episode itself. Their associated storylines via Bran's and Luck's respective arcs do appear, however. Joffrey's assassins are revealed. Olenna Tyrell plotted together Peter Baelish to poison him during the royal wedding. The poison was smuggled into the ceremony in form of fake crystals in the necklace that Dantos gave to Sansa, which, as Baelish revealed last episode, were not actual jewels, but could be crushed into a fine powder and would dissolve in wine. If you pay close attention during the wedding scene, Olenna fiddles with Sansa's necklace when she speaks to her, and afterwards when the crystals is missing from it, as she passes Joffrey's wine goblet, what sounds like the crystal dropping into it can also be heard. Ironically, as Olenna was retrieving the poisoned crystal, she was remarking on the red wedding which Joffrey's family engineered, noting with mock horror how horrid the idea of killing a man at a wedding was. Between Season 3 and Season 4, Comedy Central South Park aired a 3-part storyline parodying Game of Thrones, the Black Friday trilogy. All the boys are avid Game of Thrones fans, but as the Christmas shopping season starts up, they are split into two rival factions over the next round of video game console wars between PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Soon everybody in school, cosplaying Game of Thrones characters, start fighting each other and hatching various devious plots to win against the other side, to the point that even some of them visit George R. R. Martin at his home to ask how Game of Thrones would win their conflict. A running joke throughout Black Friday is satirizing how characters in Game of Thrones frequently discuss political intrigue while walking through the castle gardens in King's Landing, as Karma keeps discussing political backstabbing while trespassing in a neighbor's extensive gardens. In the Season 4 Blu-ray commentary, David Benioff and D.B. Wise revealed that they saw the South Park parody and, in response, consciously stopped having characters do this as frequently. The TV series even references a joke in Oathkeeper, when Lena Tyrell is getting ready to leave King's Landing while with Marjorie in the gardens. She knows to become Titus, saying, I have to take one more leisurely stroll through these gardens. I'll fling myself from the cliffs. In an interview with the Game of Thrones podcast 2 weeks after Oathkeeper aired, writer Brian Cogman answered several questions. Cogman said that Tommen was recast in Season 4 because when Tommen becomes the new king, a heavier acting load will fall on the character, so they wanted a more experienced actor. He also confirmed they did not cast Dean Charles Chapman as Tommen's first cousin Martin Lannister in Season 3 to somehow set him up as a new older Tommen. Martin and Tommen are related, so logically an older Tommen might resemble his older cousin. Rather, Chapman was cast simply to play Martin in Season 3, and after Martin was killed, Chapman thought his time working on the TV series was over. Chapman was only called back to the TV series after the production team had decided to recast Tommen in Season 4. It isn't clear if he had to audition or was hand-picked. Season 4 follows what the Night Watch mutineers were doing after the mutiny at Craster's Keep, when their fate was only briefly alluded to in the books. The writers were actually discussing back in Season 3 that they eventually wanted to follow up on these characters. This is why they casted bigger, more experienced actors such as Bern Gorman to play Carl Tanner, a person killed Craster, because they wanted to return and expand on the character in Season 4. In the books, Craster and Mormont are killed by fairly minor characters, but Season 4 builds up that Carl was a dangerous hired assassin in Fleet Bottom. The on-set camera directors got a bit carried away with showing the subjugation of Craster's wives by the mutineers, which actually toned down in the editing room from what they originally filmed. They filmed a long establishing shot of the full horror of what was going on in Craster's Keep before Carl starts monologuing. They said that was gratuitous even by their standards. It didn't really serve the plot. In the Blu-ray commentary, it's explained that the only part cut was a longer tracking shot of Mutineer entering the kitchen, then directly vomiting over the food that Craster's wives are preparing. As for the overall scenes of Mutineers brutalizing Craster's wives, professional porn actresses were hired for the shots, and the commentary says that the overall look they were attempting was a nightmarish cross between a Gustave Doré etching or Bruegel painting and work by Hieronymus Bosch. The extended rape montage of Craster's Keep was actually the opening scene of the episode in the original draft, but they quickly realized it didn't work, then cut most of it and pushed to the rest of the end of the episode. First, it was too dark and grim to open with. Second, they realized it was odd to open with a scene that doesn't include any of the characters the audience knows very well. In an interview with MakingGameOfThrones.com, Cogman made several more statements about the episode. Speaking of the sequence showing the Night's Watch mutineers who have taken over Craster's Keep and who are brutalizing Craster's remaining wives, Cogman said, quote, that sequence to this day was the hardest to write for the show, end quote. It was supposed to happen off-screen in the books after Sam McGilly fled, but wasn't shown in the narrative, so he struggled with how much of this very dark sequence to actually show in the TV series. As for why they wanted to include the sequence, one of the reasons was, quote, we paid a lot of lip service to the idea that Night's Watch is made up of shady characters, rapists and thieves, but we never saw much of that. The mutiny was the beginning. This is the worst of the worst finally free of the shackles of society, end quote. Logically, the mutineers who actually turned on Mormont were the absolute lowest dregs of the Night's Watch, hardened criminals, rapists like Ras and murderers like Carl, who rejected any societal limits and who lived to brutalize and take advantage of other people. Excuse me. Of the other character dynamics going on in Craster's Keep, Cockman said, quote, "The original idea behind Morag was that she was the first of the daughters who became Craster's wife, so she's the prime wife, if you will, and the matron figure for these women. She knows she can fight these mutineers and knows that without them, the White Walkers would destroy the wives. So there's that going on. So there's a lot going on. And then throw in Bran and Hodor, two of the most endearing characters. To have to write a scene where Hodor gets bear-baited and beat up was just miserable. But the idea was to put Bran, Hodor, and Jojen and Mir into a really dangerous situation beyond the wall that didn't involve the supernatural or the humanity at its worst," end quote. Cogman envisioned Sir Pounce in the script as a kitten, as he is in the books. But they cast a huge sumo wrestler cat, and he was a nightmare to work with. He also explained in the Game of Thrones podcast the cat wouldn't jump on the bed, and it was scared of the many lit candles in the set. Natalie Dormer found it very annoying to work with the cat. In Cockman's own words, quote, "This is part of the lesson to see Sir Pounce because filming with the cat is a nightmare. Natalie Dormer wanted to kill me, but the cat is in it because he serves a purpose. You merely see that Tommen is not Joffrey. Tommen is a sweet boy with a cat named Sir Pounce, and who has found himself in incredible circumstances. He is going to be the king and is going to marry this woman. The innocence of Tommen is fun to play with because there isn't a lot of innocence in this world," end quote. Cogman said, quote, "I love the Olenna Marjorie dynamic. When Diana Rigg joined the cast, I remember looking up in an old publicity shot for The Avengers, the 1960s spy show. I thought, she's the Nellie Dormer of her era. In our version of the story, Olenna was Marjorie and her day Marjorie will one day be Olenna. It was a scene not unlike Sansa and Littlefinger's, so it's two tutor protege scenes back to back. Olenna's illustrating to Marjorie what she has to do next through her personal story. That was based on nugget that Arthur George R. R. Martin has in the book. Olenna, in an entirely different scene, says, 'Oh, I was engaged with Targaryen once, but I got out of it.' The Dany storyline can seem so far removed, so whenever you can thread in that the Targaryens were the family once in power, the better," end quote. Tommen is obviously now sleeping in Joffrey's old bedchamber. The boys had Joffrey shot with an arrow seen on the wall. Cogman said, quote, "David and Dan thought of that. They moved Tommen into Joffrey's room and the remnants of the monster's person are still there. A big part of the show is the impact of these characters. A lot of people die, but their impact is still felt long after. Ned Stark's spirit looms large over the whole story. It's absolutely the same with Joffrey's," end quote. Cogman knows that Marjorie's scene with Tommen is a sequel of sorts to her prior scenes with her past political betrothals. Her sex scene with Rayleigh in Season 2's What Is Dead May Never Die, and her scene with Joffrey in Season 3's Dark Wings, Dark Words. In each scene, she is assessing her new betrothed, and particularly in the case of Joffrey and Tommen, explored around in the conversation until she finds what points she can manipulate them on. She had to figure out that Joffrey didn't react to sexual advances but got excited by sadistic violence, while Tommen is simply too young and innocent to react to either of those things, but is fond of his cat. It was actually Benioff and Weiss's idea that Daenerys would inspire the slaves in Meereen to rise up and free themselves, led by Grey Worm, instead of her freeing them directly. In the books, when Daenerys takes the reins, she has Jorah and Barristan sneak in through the sewers to release the city's slaves, so they can attack from within to distract the defenders, while her main army storms the gates from outside. Elements of this were removed to how Daenerys captured Yunkai in the TV series. The book version still essentially involved Jorah and Barristan, two Westerosi men, seeking in to release the slaves, but they felt it would make more dramatic sense for the slaves to be inspired by Daenerys' arrival in the season premiere, and then have Grey Worm be the one to sneak in and free them, because he himself was a slave. This fits with the line Grey Worm has in the episode that no one can give the slaves their freedom, they must take it for themselves. Olenna's story that she was once betrothed to a Targaryen in her youth is based on information in the novels, when she mentions that she was originally supposed to marry a Targaryen but struggled as hard as she could to avoid the match. The identity of the Targaryen she was betrothed to was revealed in the current books, but was revealed in the current books, but was revealed in the World of Ice and Fire source book, which was released a few months after Season 4 ended. In the book continuity, Olenna was supposed to marry King Aegon V Targaryen's younger son Daeron, the younger brother of King Jaehaerys II. Daeron was thus the nephew of Maester Aemon. Given that the TV series officially removed Jaehaerys II to make Aegon V the father of the Mad King Aerys II instead of his grandfather, it isn't clear if Daeron still exists in TV continuity, or if that entire generation of House Targaryen has simply been omitted. Nor does Olenna have a sister named Viola. Luther Tyrell was supposed to marry Daeron's sister, not her sister. For that matter, Daeron Targaryen didn't want to be in the match either, as he was secretly a homosexual. Regarding Marjorie Tyrell's scene with Tommen, his exact age hasn't been clearly established in the TV series. In the books, a little 2 years passed between the beginning of the narrative and Joffrey's death. Tommen is 7 years old at the beginning of the narrative, but 8 years old when Joffrey dies, apparently soon to turn 9 years old. The TV series aged up most of the child characters by 2 years, though this isn't true for all of them. Joffrey's age was decreased by 4 years, not 2, so he is about 16 in Season 1 instead of 12 as in the first novel. Time moves from slowly in the TV series, so one TV season equals roughly 1 year, meaning that by Season 4, 3 years have passed since the beginning of the narrative, making Joffrey 19 when he died. If Tommen was aged up by the same 2-year increment that other child actors like Arya and Sansa were, then he should be about 12 years old in Season 4. Given that Joffrey was Cersei's first child and Tommen her third, it would be impossible for Tommen to be more than 17 years old. Actor Dean Charles Chapman turned 16 during filming of Season 4, but this doesn't necessarily affect the age of the character he is portraying. Tommen is therefore far too young in the books for Marjorie to attempt to seduce him physically, but instead she tries to seduce his friendship by being kind to him as Cersei is not. Tommen is some years older in the TV version, but either way, TV Marjorie quickly realizes that he's too young to make physically seducing him effective, so she starts emotionally seducing him as she did in the books. The Grey Room and Sunday scenes in this episode are actually the first entire series to include only non-white characters, or to focus on people of color characters. This includes Dothraki and Dornish men, though more Dornish characters will appear in Season 5. This is in part simply due to the structure of the books, which are told from a subjective third-person point of view, such as Bran chapters are Bran Stark's POV, or Tyrion chapters are Tyrion's POV. All the chapters in Essos up to this point were narrated from Daenerys' POV, so while many of the non-white characters in the books appear in her storyline, these scenes are all presented from her perspective. The TV series has more freedom to show what characters in Daenerys' storyline were doing off-screen when she isn't around, from their own perspectives. Any scenes involving the Dothraki seasons 1 and 2 had either Daenerys, Viserys, or Jorah present as a narrative focus / POV narrator of sorts. Saldor Song was changed to black in the TV series, but he has always been appeared in scenes alongside Davos Seaworth, who was another POV narrator in the books. Oberyn Martell and Larry Stan were introduced in Season 4, but actually have no scenes entirely alone, unless one counts the brothel scenes in which there are white prostitutes, but Oberyn and Larry are the only major named characters. Several Dornish characters do later become POV narrators, but only starting the material which will be adapted into Season 5. Missandei identifies for the first time in dialogue that she is from Island of Nath, and was taken from there by slavers as a child. Nath is off the coast of Sothorios, the third continent in the known world, besides Westeros and Essos. It's loosely analogous to Africa. Grey Worm also states that he was taken as a baby from the Summer Islands, a large island group west of Nath and mainland Sothorios. The books never establish Grey Worm's geographic or ethnic origin, though it's entirely plausible that he is from the Summer Islands. Daenerys apparently wanted Missandei to teach Grey Worm how to speak the common tongue of Westeros so he can function as a more effective army commander when she eventually invades the Seven Kingdoms. In the books, Crassus actually stated that the Unsullied are trained to be able to pick up new languages fairly quickly so they can better serve their new masters. Qohor purchases a contingent of Unsullied. They learn to speak Qohoric Low Valyrian in a short amount of time. At certain points in Season 3, Grey Worm seemed to acknowledge comments made by Daenerys and Jorah in the common tongue. This was therefore not an inconsistency. The books outright state that Unsullied, such as Grey Worm, is trained to quickly learn how to speak new languages, at least on a basic level. Grey Worm's continued lessons with Missandei are to give a more advanced command of the language. For the shot when Grey Worm and Unsullied infiltrate Marine by wading through a sewer line, the actors wore wetsuits underneath their costumes because the water was freezing. Props Master Gorda Fitzgerald explained that for the private Jorah Mormont's skull that Carl was using as a cup, instead of just using a generic prop skull, his team went extra step and used pictures of the actor's jaw and teeth for reference. They remodeled a prop skull to match them. The image of the White Walker reflecting off the ice is one of the images that Bran saw in his vision in The Lion and the Rose. It is odd that the Kill the Masters graffiti in Marine is written in the common tongue of Westeros, given that in Slaver's Bay, the population speaks Low Valerian. Linguist David J. Peterson, who developed the Valerian languages in the TV show, pointed this out when he was shown the script. Asked if he had any questions, the message he sent to the writers was, "There's a scene where we see Kill the Masters graffitied on the wall. Fans of the books will be expecting to see this in Valerian glyphs as opposed to English characters, but thus far we haven't discussed creating a writing system for Valerian. This is something I'm able and willing to do. I agree with the writing systems user at Defiance. I can do if D&D are interested." The producers apparently wanted the viewers to be able to read the graffiti. In the novels, the Low Valerian languages in the Free States of Slaver's Bay do not use the same writing system as the common tongue of Westeros. Instead, the Valerian writing system is said to be based on glyphs. In the TV series, the glyph system wasn't developed. Characters writing in Valerian languages have simply written using the common tongue letters, apparently so the audience can at least sound it out. This was first seen in Season 3's The Bear and the Main Affair, when Talisa is writing a letter in Valerian. The scene at the end of the episode, which confirms long-held speculation that Craster's sons are taken to be turned into White Walkers, is original and does not appear in the novels. The ideas mentioned, however, Craster's wives suspect that the babies that Craster gave the White Walkers as sacrifices were turned into new others, but it wasn't clear if this is what actually happens, or if it was just the wild suspicion of Craster's frightened and isolated wives. Confirmation of this has not occurred in the books yet. The series' senior White Walker in this scene was first identified in the HBO Viewer's Guide as the infamous Night's King. However, the HBO synopsis mentioning this was later retracted, making it unclear if that was intended to be the character's real identity or just an error. The producers later referred to the character as the Night King inside the episode for Hardhome. John quipped to Locke that he should have gone easier on the other recruit as a callback to Season 1's Lord Snow. If John briefly became unpopular with the other recruits because of his superior martial skills and aloof manner. Jaime makes it sound to Cersei as if his promise to Catelyn to return her daughters to her was false, and he swore that only so she would set him free. It's unclear whether he actually never meant to keep his promise, or just said that in order to appease Cersei. On one hand, in Two Swords, he had a chance to help Sansa escape. When Brienne talked with him about that, he refused to fulfill his promise. On the other hand, in the episode, he arms Brienne with a fine sword and sends her to find Sansa, so she could fulfill her oath to Catelyn. According to Jaime's entry in the Book of Brothers, he was hired to join the Kingsguard when he was 16 years old. This matches the information from Two Swords and the Kingsguard, Jaime Lannister, but contradicts the Prince of Winterfell, in which Tyrion says Jaime was knighted when he was 17 years old. This inconsistency continues in Robert's Rebellion, Jaime Lannister, in which Jaime says he was knighted when he was 15 years old. This number matches the novels. Interesting. So overall, I think this is a pretty darn good episode, and yeah, I definitely think that Sansa should not trust Peter Baelish, but hey, that's just me, and well, I'm also happy that Brienne is going to find Sansa, but I think we all know that, yeah, she's eventually going to do that eventually, but yeah, she'll definitely have a harder time with Arya, let me tell you that. So overall, I give Oathkeeper 4 Iron Thrones out of 5. Well, anyway, tune in tomorrow as we take a look at the next episode, First of His Name. So, until then, remember everyone, winter is coming.